Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Photographers for People and Planet podcast. So today I'm really excited to have Sam on the podcast to chat with me. Now, I've got Sam on because he posted something in a Facebook group for photographers recently that kind of caught my eye, and I think it's a really interesting topic to talk about. And that's around destination weddings, destination shooting, and a particular location in particular, which is somewhere where he is based. So, Sam, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak with me. Could you just introduce yourself, a bit about your background, where you live, where you work, where you're from? Tell us everything.
Sure. Well, yeah, thank you for inviting me here today. Um, yeah, I'm originally from the UK, but as you say, I'm now based in Tokyo, Japan, and I've been here for about 4 years now. I actually arrived just when COVID hit, or just before, like 1 month before the country locked down, which was interesting. A bit of a difficult start to shifting my business over here, but yeah, I've got I guess, a bit of a history with Japan. I first came here in 2008 on a working holiday visa
Okay.
because, yeah, for for those of you who are still under 30, which I'm not anymore, but you can get the 1 year working holiday visa here, and I took that back then and had such a good time here that I always thought, maybe if the opportunity arose, I'd love to come and try living here again. And then, yeah, just got distracted along the way with different things. I've had a few different walks of life. I mean, I started life in the military, actually, in the Air Force back home. Um, when I left that's when I went to Japan, and then I somehow ended up studying Thai language in London at
Oh,
SOAS University, which then led me to working with the Red Cross in Thailand. Kind of linked in with the military background because it was more conflict related stuff.
okay.
Um, and yeah, photography was always a hobby in the background, especially being based in Thailand and having so many nice destinations to visit.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, being a bit closer to Japan as well. I certainly did a few trips to Japan during that time. Uh, yeah, somewhere along the line, the hobby kind of grew out of control, and one thing led to another, as I'm sure most of us have experienced. And then before you know it, you're doing weddings and all sorts. And yeah, so it's been a journey, but
Yeah.
quite happy to be here in Japan now.
Amazing. So, is your main photography area that you work in weddings, or do you do all sorts of different stuff?
I do kind of all sorts, really. Whether I mean, it's whatever comes up. I've done some commercial stuff, some um, corporate headshots or corporate branding. But yeah, I'd say the main and probably like my most enjoyable, to be honest, is the elopements and weddings. Probably more elopements here in Japan because the market is a bit different here, which I
Okay.
can explain a little more if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd
It's
love to hear about it.
Yeah, it's a bit different to back home in the UK, where I think couples are quite used to having lots of customization, right, and
Hmm.
choosing different vendors to to help create the wedding. But here it's more like big hotels or companies that run the weddings.
Hmm.
So it might be an all-inclusive package, or generally, particularly like for domestic couples here,
Okay.
they'll just go to a hotel or wedding venue, and the photographer's included, the dress is included. Um, so yeah, if you wanted to have your own dress, you'd probably have to pay a bit extra.
Wow.
And on the rare occasion that a venue does allow an outside photographer, again, the couple would have to pay extra. So it's a bit of a different setup here. So it's not the best actually for freelancers like myself. But gradually, like there's some solo wedding planners that are trying to shake things up a bit and designing like smaller weddings in nice venues and elopements as well in gardens. And so I've managed to come in at a good time in and kind of connect
Yeah.
with these different planners. And so yeah, it's more smaller things here, which is what I like
Okay.
actually.
Yeah. And a couple of questions popping into my head. I guess
Mm.
the first one is like, so did you do weddings, elopements when you were still in the UK, or is this a business that you started when you moved back to Japan?
No, I did start this in the UK.
Okay.
I following the Red Cross job, I did go back to the UK for a few years. I kind of got tired of that line of work, and I didn't really want to leave Thailand, to be honest with you. I'm
Yeah.
very comfortable there, but I moved back home with my cousin actually in Canterbury, and just gradually started this business. I was a bit lost, to be honest, conflicted with whether to go back into the humanitarian world or whether
Yeah.
to pursue this this as a job. And in between that, I also tried, and this will feed into it a bit actually. I tried to go to Japan
Hmm.
initially on a student visa because that's kind of one way into the country. With the student visa, you can still legally work for 20 hours a week. So I thought it would be
Okay.
a good way to get into the country and also gradually start business. But I think at that point in time and where I was at mentally, I guess I wasn't much of a student anymore, and the contrast of being, working for the Red Cross and then um, shifting to student life was a bit too much.
Yeah.
And in the end, I cracked, I guess you could say, and I went back to the UK and just tried to work things out. And fortunately for me, the photography um, just took shape. A few friends asked for something, and then
Yeah.
it grew from there. But so yeah, I spent a few years in the UK building this, and then in November 2019, just before COVID was really warming up,
Yeah.
I came out here to apply for the visa, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to get it, um, but I did, and then I flew here February 1st, 2020,
Oh
which was
wow. Right
yeah,
before
right
the
before.
shit hits the fan.
Yes.
um okay, so you had an established business. So not that we're here really to talk too much about visas and things, but it does kind of tie in. So you had a
Mm,
business that you then wanted to move out to Japan, I guess. You wanted to
yeah.
continue doing the same work. Was that quite complicated?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I mean, Japan, they have quite a unique visa actually. They do an artist visa,
Okay.
um, and there's several hoops to get through. And I don't know whether to consider myself a true artist or not, or a technician. I don't know, but anyway, I can
Yeah.
fall under the category of artist for visa purposes. And because I had the connections, well, I kept in touch with people from the working holiday.
Yeah.
I had people here that could write me kind of references or,
Yeah.
um, a desire to work together, and the necessary savings and whatnot to be able to self-sponsor like that. Because it's a bit tricky. I mean, that's the only way in if you wanted to um, be here just doing your photography business. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people might try teaching English first and
Yeah.
gradually transition into it, but that would have been okay in my earlier years, but I
Yeah.
don't think I could do it now, particularly when the business was flowing in the UK.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite a unique visa they have, and I went through a lawyer to do that. It took several months and liaising with friends to organize things. So if you can tick the boxes, you can do it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and I got my first visa for 1 year, and then I got another 1 year, and then a 3 year, and that's up for renewal this coming January actually. So I've got to start
Okay.
preparations for that. Um,
And so to renew it, do you have to submit things like your business taxes, accounts, and things to prove that you're like earning money, contributing, or how does that work?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, got to prove you're paying your taxes and everything on time. But I have a little bit of trouble with that. That there's a lot of paperwork here, like not a lot of digital stuff.
Oh, right. That's
Everything's
surprising
quite.
for Japan.
Yeah, some things Japan's very, very modern, like their
Yeah.
toilet seats are fantastic. But other things they're really, really backwards and manual. So
Interesting.
I usually go away for the summer, and that's usually when the tax slips come in. So I kind of, yeah, sometimes I'm a few months late. But anyway, it's all good.
Yeah.
And just part of the process, really. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, cool. And then I'm also really curious in terms of your clientele who you work with. Being a British photographer working in Japan, do you work with Japanese couples? Do you work with international couples? Do you work with a mix?
It is a mix, but yeah, usually it'll be international couples or mixed couples, like one Japanese person and one foreign person as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's quite a unique position to be in here. There's not a lot of us English speaking photographers here in
Hmm.
Tokyo. It's slowly growing, but Japan's quite a unique place, and it's not for everyone. There's a with all the beautiful scenery and everything we have here, it's a great place to live, but like with that all that paperwork I mentioned, some things
Yeah.
are quite challenging too. So yeah, but no, sometimes I do work with Japanese couples as well. They
Hmm.
might have been recommended to me via the planners, or just maybe they've these particular couples have spent some time overseas and they, yeah, like the style that they've seen maybe in Europe or the US,
Mm.
and have somehow stumbled across my work.
Yeah.
Because as I say, back to what we said in the beginning, most couples would automatically go to a hotel venue and everything would be included in the
Yeah.
package, and in
Okay.
the
Yeah.
contract. So, yeah. So right now it's a lot of inbound kind of tourists that I work with that have decided to have a holiday and elope and honeymoon all at the same time. So that's probably the
Okay.
core
Yeah.
customer base for me.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
those destination couples who are coming specifically to Japan for
Yeah.
that destination experience, whether it's I guess for a wedding or for an elopement or a couple
Yeah.
shoot. Um,
Yeah.
cool. I guess well that brings us really nicely then onto kind of the main kind of meaty thing of what we wanted to talk about, which was
Yes.
kind of I guess your kind of observations. So for because I know a lot of the people that listen to this work in elopements. It's kind of just because of my background. That's how a lot of people came to this podcast. And elopements, we talk a lot about leave no trace. We talk
Mm.
about respecting the natural environment. But for me, and it's the reason I have photographers for people and planet as the whole topic behind the podcast is we're often not talking about when we do destination work going into other cultures. And within Western society, within Europe, there are differences in culture between the UK and the US. There are differences in culture, but maybe it's not so obvious, a lot of the differences. Whereas for me personally, when I think of Japan, or anywhere, outside of Western Europe, the US, you start to see a lot of different cultures. And then there's the idea of, well, there's notions of actually being respectful in these different cultures, how to conduct yourselves. So tell me a little bit about kind of what you see happening in the photography space in Japan at the moment, and why that's kind of almost prompted you to kind of speak out about this, which is why your post caught my eye in the Facebook group. So tell me a bit about it.
Yeah, well, a few of us here have been talking about it, wedding planners as well as photographers, and it's not something we can stop happening. And I also have to be careful how to choose my words, I guess, as well, because we've all probably done a few things when we were starting out that perhaps now we wouldn't do. But yeah, Japan right now is in a real tourism boom. I think more so than ever before. And so with that, there's lots of people coming here. It's quite popular on Instagram. You're seeing Japan around a lot as a dream destination. And of course, there's the seasons, cherry blossoms, autumn leaves, the beautiful shrines, Mount Fuji. Like, it's a really popular spot right now. So of course that's bringing quite a few destination wedding photographers, or just photographers coming for a short period of time and running a load of couples sessions. So yeah, I was starting to get a bit conflicted as to what to do, because Japan's incredibly sensitive, and it's a collective society rather than individualistic, and there are a lot of rules and customs that we should follow, and regulations. So for example, a lot of the traditional gardens here in Tokyo, I mean, they're private. You pay to enter, and these are beautiful gardens, and really a great place for a pre-wedding shoot or something like that. But actually, so you can get permits for a lot of these gardens, some not. But quite often those permits are for kimono shoots only.
Okay.
So not a white wedding dress. And yeah, I'm very conscious of not pushing the boundaries with these things, because I guess you can fly under the radar, but eventually, someone is going to get caught pushing the boundaries a little too much, and then everybody else that's potentially doing things properly, might lose access altogether. I don't know whether you saw a story recently about this convenience store at Mount Fuji that had a beautiful view of Mount Fuji, and it became so popular on Instagram, and people really taking the piss, I guess, with that viewpoint and getting in the middle of the road. It was also obstructing, I think it was a dental practice there, or a clinic. And so, yeah, they just took the step to completely block the view with a big black board. And that's the type of thing that can occur when we don't adhere to the rules here. And when I do shoots around the Mount Fuji area, I tend to work with a local tour guide that's well connected, and we're working hard to build relationships there with shrines, or sometimes might use a glamping site that have nice viewpoints. And so there's a local connection there. Maybe I make a donation to the shrine. Everything, we try to do it as properly as possible.
Yeah.
But there is one shrine now that's recently put up signs to say no commercial photography. And it's not just destination wedding photographers, it's also
Yeah.
YouTubers as well. I think the YouTubers have, there's been a few negative stories, and you're seeing it more and more in the media here.
Hmm.
That, yeah, people are getting caught out, and yeah, it's kind of a problem right now. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, there are selfish reasons too, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, I tried very hard to get the visa and go through the lawyer, and just the act of being here in Japan and filing my taxes in Japanese and stuff like this, you know,
Yeah.
and just building the knowledge of different areas. But I realize, this is not something you can stop. People will always do this. So it's more about, I guess, educating people to try to follow the rules and customs, and just really be aware that you can't just shoot anywhere in Japan, because
Yeah.
and a shrine and temple is, a spiritual kind of working place where people still go to worship and say their prayers, and so I think it's entirely reasonable that they do put some of these restrictions in place.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I completely feel it. I have a lot of friends, colleagues also who work in the destination space who are living in a country that is not their own. Anyone who has gone through any form of immigration to be able to legally work somewhere, myself included, it does make you have a different view for sure of people who
Yeah,
come in and do destination work who aren't paying the taxes. For me, where I live in Austria, about 55% of my income goes to the taxes and
right.
governmental things. And it's just, it does make you kind of, I think twice. When you've gone through that process, I think when you're starting out, there's sometimes this naivety, right? Of, the
Hmm.
world is my oyster, and there's loopholes, there's ways you can do it.
Yeah,
But at some point, it kind of loops back around to the point where the things that you did when you started out, myself included, are actually now the things you see other people doing that you're like, oof, not proud of that.
yeah, yeah,
um, so if you know, for people who are still shooting destinations, who, like you said, people are still going to come here.
yeah,
Um, how can people educate themselves to make sure that they are being respectful destination photographers, that they're being culturally sensitive and not being culturally appropriative and things like that?
yeah. Well, in Japan, I think there are always very clear rules when it comes to venues and locations. There
Mm-hmm.
might be some that it's a bit of a grey area. And sometimes things get lost in translation too. I mean, when they say no commercial photography, um, a wedding's not a commercial job, but what really the translation is, I think, is photography for profit,
Mm-hmm.
which weddings would fall under that category, I
Yeah.
believe. Um, yeah, it's a tricky one, but I think if people come here and they have a location that they're looking to shoot at, it's, they should do their research as to whether they're actually allowed to shoot there, and if they can, via a permit, go through the necessary process to do so. And that, most likely, you'd probably have to hire someone in Japan to kind of process that for you.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I did an elopement a few months ago that was in a kind of public garden, yeah, semi-public, and in order to get that permit, we needed to go to the city office of that ward. So, it's a whole extra day added, or half a day added to that process to get the permissions to do that. And once we
Mhm.
were there and with the permit, the security guard was really happy to have us in that garden because it's not such a popular one. And
Mhm.
he was like, really, oh, please come back again,
Yeah.
And it's the same with the Mount Fuji Kawaguchiko area, which is really popular. I feel myself working with a local tour guide there. That's been really great, and he's coordinated with the shrine, and the shrine have even said to him, like, yeah, there's a lot of people coming now and we're not
Yeah.
sure what to do. So, and they remembered me from the first time I did it with the guide, and that we left. You do like a little donation in an envelope, and
Mm.
they just want to know, like, uh, who's coming and why are you there, and
Mhm.
just to make sure it's done properly.
Yeah.
But other places will be, a lot more strict, and maybe it's just not allowed. Um, yeah. So I think, like, when in doubt, particularly when it comes to a temple or shrine, you probably shouldn't do that in Japan. And ideally, I think you'd be working with a, wedding planner based in Japan that is helping to facilitate everything and can let you know the best way of going about things.
Yeah.
Because I still make mistakes. My Japanese is intermediate at best.
Yeah.
It's workable, but I've still got a long way to go. But I'm just trying to do my best um, to follow the rules and
Mm.
not disturb people as well. I think Tokyo is quite, particularly with the couple shoots in the cities. It's quite a cramped place. There's so many different bars and restaurants, and they're all quite small. And a lot of requests will be, having some shots, drinking in the izakayas, or
Mm.
sat out somewhere with nice lanterns and whatnot. And I think you've got to remember, these are working businesses,
Yeah.
and so again, you just don't want to disturb those businesses too much, or perhaps try to build a relationship with one first, that that they're happy to have you there, or you spend some money on a nice meal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not getting in the way, because if you're blocking the entrance because you're getting a shot with some nice lanterns and
Mhm.
Japanese characters written there, yeah, I mean, just put yourself in the business owner's shoes. How would you feel if you've got this wedding shoot going on outside your little noodle shop, and it's happening every night or every other day?
Yeah.
It's going to get disturbing. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, just
And do these things happen quite regularly? Because I think that's often where things snowball, because destination photographers who come in maybe are unaware of how regular these things happen, how regular certain locations are being used. And that can often be what starts to cause the tension, right? It's this
yeah,
it's not a one-off event. It is for that couple, it might be for that photographer, but for the people living there, working there,
yeah,
it's becoming more of an everyday occurrence. Is that something that's also becoming more kind of
yeah.
prevalent in Japan?
I think the more popular a place gets, and the more issues or uh,
Yeah.
yeah, problems that happen, like the convenience store in
Yeah.
Mount Fuji, but then, yeah, gradually we start to lose access to places like these, or yeah, security tightens up. And one of the big parks here, Shinjuku Gyoen, which is a popular park to shoot in. I mean, Japanese photographers will also shoot there too, but generally it's for, like, quite casual family stuff. But
Hmm.
during the peak seasons, um, yeah, I guess this is quite a cultural point. Um, it's the same in Thailand as well, about saving face.
Hmm.
So I think some things you could perhaps do, but other things you should know not what to do, or not,
Yeah.
should know not to do.
Yeah.
So there might be a family shoot happening in Shinjuku-gyoen during the cherry blossoms that's probably quite clearly a professional shoot. And
Mm.
security guards now, they walk around with a sign um, that says like no photography or what.
Yeah.
um, but they just walk around, and I think as long as you're not disturbing the peace, and if it's not overtly a wedding shoot in white wedding dress and suit and kimono, I think they kind of just let that slide. Again,
Mm.
so yeah, admittedly, I will do some like family sessions or smart casual. So that's why I sometimes feel
Mm.
conflicted as to what I say here, whether I'm being hypocritical or not.
Yeah.
But I draw the line with the wedding shoots, because that's clearly a no, no, and perhaps more disturbing as well, because it's perhaps a more detailed shoot, take up a bit more space, take more time. But yeah, so security guards will walk around in Shinjuku Gyoen, and if you are doing a wedding shoot there, you're more than likely to get kicked out and
Mm-hmm.
taken to the park office. So
Okay.
yeah, I am having this discussion now with my friends, peers here in Tokyo, as to what are the best gardens to still shoot at, what are the easiest ones when it comes to permits, and we're just
Mm.
trying to summarize everything. I mean, we have a few spots that work officially,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot that do not work, and so
Yeah.
we have to stay away from those. Um,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. So I guess then, has your kind of perspective, and we've kind of touched on this before, but I think it's a really interesting part of a lot of photographers' journeys, especially if you, we also said before about going through an immigration process, actually going through the process of getting work permits and things. Has that changed, or let me go back. Have you done stuff before where you haven't necessarily gone through the whole work permit process? So for me personally, I have done things before that I look back on and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't do that now. For me, it's more, again, going back to like the leave no trace, because I've personally only ever worked in Europe, and turned
yeah,
down further afield stuff because I either knew the visa stuff was complicated or I just didn't want to have to deal with it.
yeah,
Um, but I've done stuff like taking people through long grass meadows in certain areas of like the Dolomites, where I now know that that's really frowned upon.
mm,
You don't, if it's long grass especially, you don't go in the meadows, because that is the farmer's product. They usually do 2 to 3 cuts a year. It's like that is what they sell. It's what they feed their animals on. And so for us to be just like walking through it, thinking, oh, it's just a field of grass, is super disrespectful. And it's now led
yeah,
to so many people putting fences around. I know
yeah,
that now. I didn't used to. I wouldn't do it now.
yeah.
But hindsight is wonderful. um, so I admit I haven't been perfect. For you, has have you done stuff in the past that you would now think I wouldn't do that again? Because it's great to, I think, reflect on our journeys.
Yeah, yeah. I think certainly I've probably in the past, maybe just if there's a little barrier, maybe I've taken one or two steps over just to
Yeah.
cut it out of the shot. And I've always been pretty conscious of the flowers and fauna, to not uh, destroy those. I just don't want to be doing that, but I have admittedly, you know, taken a chance with just going over a little barrier. And then, I'm going to sound like a big hypocrite as well. I did do a wedding in the US once before. And that came about just through uh, a couple that I photographed in London with
Mm.
their engagement. proposal, and they just really wanted to have me out there. Yeah, I kind of feel bad now looking back, because I'm here complaining about visas, and whatnot. But I guess at least there I was, at a venue. I'd really discussed with the venue first, and it all seemed to be okay, and it was a wonderful, wedding actually, and
Yeah.
yeah. But would I do that again in the future? Because it did cause me a bit of anxiety too, going through that process.
Yeah.
So yes, I don't think I'd be doing that again. And having gone through the process here of obtaining a visa, going through the lawyer, I just have a newfound, I think, respect for people that are really trying to make their lives in that country, and and respect the cultural differences, or hardships even that come with that, because there's a lot to learn when you move to a new place, and I'm sure even just like to Austria, it's not as far away, but there will be cultural differences to the UK that you have to get used to, and someone
Yeah.
that's just flying from the UK won't know that until they've been there for quite some time, I guess.
Absolutely. That's personally one of my biggest bugbears is somebody, it doesn't matter where in the world it is, who travels somewhere for a week, 2 weeks, sometimes even a month, and then says like, "Oh yeah, I'm an expert. I know about this place." And for
Yeah,
me to really understand the culture of a place, the way of life, you have to live somewhere for quite a considerable amount of time
yeah,
to realize, oh, actually, okay, no, things are a little bit different here. People talk to each other differently here. There's certain things that are just kind of seen as being respectful or disrespectful. And certainly, yeah, as a photographer working also with predominantly destination clients, you see things differently when you see people coming in who don't necessarily understand the way things are done. And some of these are unwritten rules, right? It's
yeah,
just kind of like accepted within the culture. This is how you do things. This is how you work in certain spaces. And you see people coming in and you're like, even though maybe there's no written rule, that it's going to upset the local
yeah,
people,
yeah,
especially landowners and things, to the
yeah,
point where you can see changes happening over time. You can see fences being put up or big
yeah.
things blocking views.
Yes,
You can see access restrictions. You can see charges start to come in to access certain locations. And so like they can have a compounding effect, which you only really notice, I think, if you live somewhere, if you're engaged in the local communities and cultures.
yeah.
So I
I think
think, yeah, go on, carry
so.
on.
Yeah, I think as well, I mean, not so much in Japan. I think you could get yourself into trouble, um, a bit of a slap on the wrist maybe if you've been disrespectful somewhere, and maybe they call the police or something. I mean, it'll be fine, but it's obviously not great to go through that. But I also lived in Thailand for about 6 or 7 years, and although it was a different field of work, I went quite deep
Mm,
into society there. And if you were doing like destination weddings in Thailand, regularly without knowing the right people, you could easily step on someone's toes. They're like another photographer on their
mm,
turf, and the rules are a bit different there. Thailand's great. People are really sabai and relaxed and chilled out. But yeah, if you embarrass someone, make them lose face, or if you kind of are on their turf and they don't know you, and they could make that cheeky call to the immigration, and before you know it, you've got a little visit at your hotel because you frustrated the wrong person,
mm.
and you haven't got your paperwork in order. So some countries it could be even more problematic. I think in Japan it's something like that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But you could be ruining things for others further down the line, and also making people don't like conflict here. I
Mm.
there is some overlap actually with British people and Japanese people, with the politeness thing and a
Yeah.
bit more indirect communication, and reading the air a bit more.
Yeah.
But perhaps it's amplified a bit more here, and if you put people in an awkward spot, it causes a lot of stress for them, because they're not gonna shout out loud or lash out, but internally I think they'd be struggling a lot as to
Mm.
how to deal with this situation. And
Yeah.
you don't want to be doing that to
Yeah.
people. So it's, yeah, you might not necessarily see it overtly here, but yeah, your actions really can have an impact on the way someone's feeling.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to kind of wrap this up a little bit because I think we've kind of covered the main things. And so, yeah, what for you then does it mean to be kind of you can use the word sustainable, ethical, responsible kind of photographer, especially when it comes to shooting destinations, from
Yeah,
kind of your point of view as somebody who's moved to a country with a completely different culture?
yeah. Well, I guess first of all, you should probably do your research, um, into the culture itself, the cultural norms, um, how to conduct yourself, and not just a quick skim through a blog post or something, 7 customs
Mm.
to remember in Japan or something like that. Really takes some time to read a lot, and see what subtleties you can find. Um, so yeah, learning about the culture. Um, I mean, ideally, you'd get things through official channels, whether it's the permits that you need to shoot at a location,
Mm.
or working through a planner on the ground that's local, that can vouch for you and steer you in the right direction. Um, a visa, perhaps, but I kind of I'm past that. Thinking about that now, it's more, just trying to educate people. I think I'll probably create a blog post soon on, kind of customs, rules, and things to consider as a
Mm.
photographer in Japan, because I think that's all you can do really, is just
Yeah.
make people aware, and just, yeah, I mean, it's pretty pretty simple really, just to try and follow the rules, learn the local customs, and try to follow the regulations
Yeah.
on the ground. If you
Yeah.
do happen to make a mistake and it was an honest mistake, just be sincere, polite, apologetic, and, smile. Yeah, and hopefully no no major harm done. But yeah, just
Yeah.
to be very aware of the culture you're going into, because these places can be very different.
Yeah. Okay. Great. That's amazing. Thank you. I guess, is there anything else that you want to share about your journey, your experience, that we haven't covered?
Um, well, I think for me, having worked in uh, two countries in the same industry, it's just been quite a fascinating journey to see how different it is in Japan with the wedding industry. And as we
Mm.
said in the beginning, it's quite customizable back home, and you know, kind of here everything's very locked down and you can't break into it very well. Um, and yeah, I probably should have done a bit more research before coming, because I didn't really know it would be quite like that.
Yeah.
So that's been nice. But the positive side here with the weddings, the flow of the days are actually a bit different too, and they're often a bit shorter. So that kind of means I get to go home a bit earlier. A full day package of 8 hours is genuinely 8 hours. I'm not staying on the dance floor because usually there isn't a dance floor or party at the end of it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's been welcome. And just being able, I really appreciate when I have these, I guess, like pinch yourself moments that you're in a Japanese traditional building. There's the bride and groom are in kimono. You've got the kimono lady putting them into these poses, and because it's quite yeah, with the kimonos, they're beautiful pieces of clothing, but you're quite rigid. It's very heavy and it's very hot.
Okay.
So you're not candid. Photography with kimonos is perhaps a bit more difficult when it's the couple's portraits, and there are just these set poses, that the way you hold the fan in the hands, the way you place your hands, is it the left over the right or the right over the left hand? It's quite intricate, and I guess that's another point when you come here is if you end up doing those types of shoots, um, you might yeah, you won't have any idea of how to pose these people, and still I don't really remember all of these poses, but there's always the kimono lady and makeup artist there that I put the couple in a nice spot, and I say, can we do the one where you flail out the kimono, or can you the fan in the hands, and she will direct that, and that's I've had to train myself a bit more to coming from the UK where there's perhaps a bit more movement and flowing, but then going to a more traditional type of photography. And I think when you're in that kimono, traditional clothing, traditional place, there's absolutely still it, that posing looks good for a reason. And I think, the photographers before us definitely knew what they were doing, and creating these beautiful poses. Yeah, so that's been interesting too. But yeah,
I'm really curious. This was not where I was going to go, but I feel like I want to ask: is there, because in some cultures, sometimes it can feel uncomfortable when, especially foreigners, come in and dress in traditional clothing. That there is an aspect of kind of cultural appropriation there. Is there any feeling with that? Do destination couples want to dress in like the kimonos, and how do the locals feel about that? Is that something people are comfortable with when outsiders, non-Japanese people want to wear traditional clothing? Is that another area where people have to be more respectful?
no, I think, I mean, I may be wrong on this, but my feeling is with the people I've worked with and the gardens I've worked with, where we have good connections. I mean, it might just be politeness, but I feel they genuinely celebrate, the kimono, and the fact that someone from halfway across the world has flown all the way over here to wear, a traditional Japanese kimono in a traditional garden. I think they're quite happy that Japanese culture is so sought after and promoted. So I don't think that idea of appropriation, I don't think that's something in the minds here yet. I don't know. I think it's, at least with the people I've worked with, it's celebrated. What I would say though is sometimes I felt a bit awkward. Tattoos. Tattoos here are uh, connected to gangsters, the Yakuza.
Okay.
So actually, if you were to come here and go to a hot spring hotel, if you've got tattoos, you won't be allowed in the hot spring.
Okay, interesting.
So that's quite a thing. So I have had a few like brides, like a sleeveless dress, and then there's a big tattoo, and you're in a traditional garden. I'm sure probably the locals or the garden
Mm.
owner or something is probably thinking, "Well, that's a strong look."
Okay, yeah,
But again, it's we have the connections. We're meant to be there. We've paid our dues,
yeah,
and it's okay. But I think if you were conducting a couple's portrait session in the streets, perhaps, I mean, it's not just like tattoos. It's quite a conservative country here.
okay,
So how
yeah,
revealing like the outfit
hmm,
might be,
yeah,
um, it's something to think about. And tattoos in like a shrine and like a
mm,
revealing outfit. I mean, in Thailand, when you go to a temple, usually you have to rent some trousers to put on if you've got a short skirt or shorts on,
mm,
even for the
mm,
guys. Um, so there are things like that to
yeah,
consider as well, to
yeah.
be respectful. Yeah, the tattoo one catches people out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's as well where that local knowledge, um, you know, is really, really beneficial as well. It's not just for you as a photographer, but it's also guiding your clients in also how to be respectful, how to
Mm,
exactly that dress respectfully. Um, I think about this a lot when I've traveled the last few years to places within the Middle East,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
still see people um, especially people, YouTubers, influencers in these very long floaty skirts, very skimpy tops. And you can see that it's drawing attention
yeah,
and it can be uncomfortable. And yes, some cultures, they may not say anything, but it can make
yeah,
people feel uncomfortable. So that's also another really important part of the work we do as photographers is making sure, yeah, our clients are also not just us, but our clients are being respectful. So I think that's a
yeah,
really, really important point. And yeah, for Japan, the tattoos, something I never would have known. Not that
yeah.
I'm going to Japan. Well, I mean, I might go to Japan personally, but interesting to know. Then I would need to cover mine up
Yeah,
because
well,
I
you
would be
could.
someone who wanted to be respectful. Because for me, that is important. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be fine. I mean, just it's so hot right now in the Japanese
yeah,
summer as well. You're not going to be covering up, and I think
yeah,
people are quite aware now that a lot of foreigners have tattoos, but perhaps a bit of
yeah,
care, like in
in
more
certain locations,
religious
and yeah,
locations. And for the hot springs,
yeah,
there are starting to be places now that
yeah,
accommodate foreigners with tattoos, or you can kind of plaster up, get a big plaster and put that over.
yeah,
Um, I've got some friends coming next week and they have tattoos, so we're currently researching what size bandages and plasters we need to cover up so we can go to a hot spring hotel
yeah,
whilst they're here.
yeah.
Yeah,
But you say that's also really valuable local insights to have of where is more Western friendly or more open to tourists, where it's more conservative. So I think it's all really great stuff to know.
yeah.
Okay, so I guess wrapping up, I just love to know from you,
Mhm.
do you see yourself staying in Japan or do you see
Oof.
potentially other adventures or returning to the UK, or is this something to be decided as the future just rolls along?
That's a good question and something that's been going through my mind quite a lot because I'm approaching the 5 year point now in
Mm,
Japan, and my connections and business is getting more entrenched here.
yeah,
Um, I got a lot of things going on in my head, Kat. I think like as I'm approaching 40 now, um, I start to think about the stand, the more, uh, what's the word? kind of don't want to use the word standard. The usual route in the UK of family, mortgage, settling down, pension plan,
Yeah.
and the fact that I'm still here in my little apartment in Tokyo. I'm enjoying life and having a great time. Very grateful to be here. But yeah, sometimes I wonder, is it time to go back to the UK and fit into the usual model of how things are done? Am I leaving it too late? I guess that's a bigger question for an entirely other podcast. But I think I'm going to apply for the visa renewal, hopefully get another 3 years, and I'll certainly aim to complete those 3 years, and then perhaps reassess then. But I'm quite content. I like the UK. I like Japan. Also love Thailand as well, and I'm going to end up in one of those countries.
Okay.
But
Awesome.
yeah, for now it's Japan, and it's treating me well.
So, okay. For
Yeah,
now, it's
yeah,
Japan and watch this space.
yeah. So who knows if I'll be call it a Oji-san, an old man in Japan going to the bathhouses every day and yeah, enjoying life that way. I don't. It does make me think. I don't. How many foreigners I see here that have stayed long term and until old age as well.
Mm,
Maybe they're perhaps a bit further in the countryside. You do hear
okay.
stories of people that have renovated a house out in the country, or they've got quite a unique business. Like
Yeah.
there's lots of things people are doing, but yeah, it's a bit different to Thailand. Thailand's a bit more international, I'd say. There's a
Mm,
lot more retirees, and
yeah.
it's an easier place in a way to settle into. Japan, you need to work at it a bit, but it's a great place to be.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm excited to follow whatever comes along in your journey.
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sam, for talking. If people want to follow your work, if they want to stalk what it's like to live in Japan, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, there's my website at samspicerphotography.com, and then also on Instagram, which is samspicer.photo, I think. So,
Okay.
yeah, please
I'll
feel
link.
free to follow there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll link everything in the show notes as well, so everyone can find you easily and stalk you.
Yeah, and if anybody is visiting Japan, or they do have, a wedding planned here to photograph, and they need some tips, cultural tips, and
Yeah.
stuff like that, feel free to message me, and I can let you know
Yeah.
the ins and outs of things.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Thank you
Cool.
so much.
Oh, thank you. It was fun talking with you, Kat.
Yeah.